I'm here at Russ and Daughters Cafe, my restaurant on New York's Lower East Side. The restaurant's currently closed for indoor dining, but we hope to reopen in the spring at least 50%, if not more, at that time. If you don't know Russ and Daughters, we're considered the torchbearers of Jewish American cuisine in this country, specifically the food tradition known as appetizing. Don't worry if you haven't heard of appetizing, but if you know and love bagels and lox, that is appetizing. Russ and Daughters was started by my great-grandfather, Joel Russ, in 1914. He started out by just selling schmaltz herring to other poor Jewish immigrants. When he needed workers, he brought in his 3 young daughters, and in 1935 he changed the name, making his daughters his partners, and thereby becoming the first business in this country that has "and daughters" in its name. My parents ran Russ and Daughters for 30 years. I was a shop kid, and now my cousin Josh and I are the 4th generation co-owners. For literally 100 years, Russ and Daughters was just our original appetizing store, which is a few blocks from where I am right now. But in 2014, Josh and I set out to open a restaurant, which became Russ and Daughters Cafe. And we've since opened a second restaurant uptown, Russ and Daughters at the Jewish Museum, our own bakery where we make all of our bagels, bialys, babka, rugelach, black and whites. We have a nationwide shipping facility and a location in Brooklyn. When COVID has certainly been the biggest challenge that we've faced in 107 years. But I've been really buoyed by having the perspective and knowing that 3 generations of my family went through their own adversities. My great-grandfather with the Spanish flu pandemic, 2 world wars, depressions, recessions, more recently 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy. And I've also been motivated by looking to the future and having the desire that Russ and Daughters should be around for another 100 years. And that has motivated me to know that whatever sacrifices and hardships we have to go through now, we've gotten through it before, and it's worth it to be able to keep it moving, into the future. And so with that, I want to talk about longevity. And I recognize that might come off as tone deaf or even crazy, considering the times we're in, and the fact that we are facing so many challenges and struggles, and we're really, all of us are just trying to get through one day at a time. So it's hard to even think about, what comes next. I also recognize that I'm the 4th generation of a 107-year-old business, and that is an exceptional anomaly. Less than 1% of businesses in this country make it to a 4th generation. And in our industry, the norm is quite the other extreme. Most restaurants and bars have very short lifespans. Here in New York, pre-COVID, 90% of restaurants didn't make it past their first year. So what is longevity? The simplest definition that I like is that it's something of long continuance. And it's that word, continuance, or continuity, that is the crux of it for me, because what's important is not the number of years, but the continuity of experience. I think that by having the intention or the mindset of longevity, it reshapes how we approach our businesses, our jobs, and our decision making. And it creates a better experience, both for not just for business, but for our guests and for ourselves personally. It requires some undoing, because we are all conditioned to think that change is necessary and that change is progress. We live in a world where, Everything is in constant flux. But it leaves us disconnected. Why? Because there are fewer and fewer experiences that root us in the real physical world, in the company of others, and that provide some constant in our lives. And it's these places and these foods um, that, and I would say our industry is a prime vehicle of this, that connect us to who we are and where we come from. So I believe that continuity is the rarest form of currency. But it's easy to mistake continuity for stagnation and to think that that means that you have to try to keep everything the same. In fact, the definition of continuity is uninterrupted duration or continuation without essential change. And that is so one of the guiding lights for me in how I approach Russ and Daughters. Um, in everything that we do, my cousin Josh and I are always thinking about how to, at the same time, try to preserve 107 years of history and tradition while also keeping it moving forward. And so the changes we make have to be in a organic extension of what we are, and but also keep Russ and Daughters relevant to today and to future generations. Continuity, therefore, implies a continuum. It's the connective tissue between the past, the present, and the future. So, for example, here at Russ and Daughters Cafe, we intentionally did not want to make it look old and start, chipping away at paint and because we are old. And we also didn't want to make it so precious and modern that it would disconnect people from the feelings of nostalgia that our food and establishment evoke for so many people. Setting an intention of longevity um, makes you, I think, a better business person. When we were looking for spaces to open Russ and Daughters Cafe, we spoke with a lot of landlords, and we told them we're looking for a 100-year lease. And everyone would kind of look and laugh nervously around the table and wonder if we were serious. And of course, we weren't truly serious, but we were also communicating something there. We were saying, we're Russ and Daughters, and if we're going to open a restaurant in your space, it's not going to be a flash in the pan. It's got to be around for 100 years. Maybe not literally, but it's got to be a viable business. The numbers have to work. The margins have to work. The space has to work. And we luckily, took going through a bunch of different conversations to find someone who truly understood that and wanted the same thing. As a landlord, he wanted to make it work to have long-term tenants. We talk a lot in our industry about trends. I would argue that trends are run counter to longevity because trends come and go. And if you're chasing a trend or basing your business model on a trend, there's going to be a limited time span to that before some other shiny new trend comes along. My family has been making and serving our food long before it was sexy or trendy, and we're going to be doing it long after. When it loses its trendiness, and we're still going to be doing that, and people will still be looking to us for these foods and for this continuity. Legacy is something that I think about every single day. and really informs me. And I would encourage all of you to connect to your legacy, your lineage. And it doesn't have to be, you know, 4 generations and 100 years, but thinking about who are the people, influences, and traditions who make you who you are and brought you to where you are today. Connect to that, and that will inform in a very authentic, meaningful way how you think about your menu, your cocktail program, your decor, your messaging and tone. Um, be connected to your lineage, and by doing so, you will enable your guests to connect to theirs. Here at the cafe, you might even be able to see behind me, but we have, and in all of our locations, we have large black and white images of my family throughout the years. But you will not find any wall text explaining who's in the picture, what year it was taken. Because very intentionally, we want people to look at those images, and maybe it evokes a memory for them, or reminds them of their grandparents or their immigrant story, their childhood memories. We are also, as an industry, I think, trained to think about how to be constantly reinventing ourselves. You know, changing the menu, coming up with a new drinks, or changing the decor. Resist the urge to constantly redo. Create things that become classics. Not everything will become a classic, but those which do, hold on to those and embrace those, because those are the things that your guests will keep coming back for. Because it's the things that last that create the Madeleine moments. And what I mean by a Madeleine moment is, if you know of the famous Proust book, Remembrance of Things Past, there's a moment where the main character bites into a Madeleine, a French cookie, and is flooded with this sort of involuntary memory of childhood. And we all have those Madeleine moments, and we have the power to create Madeleine moments for our guests. And so find out what those are and keep that as the continuous thread, because our food and drink and the spaces that we create are vehicles for memory. It is not uncommon in Russ and Daughters on any given day to find someone who has a tear rolling down their cheek, because our food evokes so much for them. And because Russ and Daughters has been around for so long, for so many people, it is a way for people to feel and to remember. And so, again, you don't have to be 107 years old to be able to do that. It's also important and hard to do to say no more than you say yes. Stay critical and picky, so that when the right opportunity comes your way, you're poised to do it and you're not overextended. One of the lessons of COVID has not only been the importance of pivoting and being flexible. I think that comes naturally to us in our line of work, right? But the importance of being of simplifying and streamlining is equally as important. Saying no is not a negation; it's an affirmation of what your core strengths are, and the allegiance to staying focused on that. It's also having a longevity mindset in most cases will, I think, make you more conservative. I don't mean politically, I mean in terms of business. And I think that's a good thing. But it'll also enable you and empower you to take big risks when it makes sense to do that. When we needed to build a production space, we built an 18,000 square foot space from nothing, and it was 3 times the amount of space that we actually needed at the time. And you have to remember that here in New York City, that square footage is a lot of real estate. But we weren't thinking about, we were thinking more about the what was coming up down the road. And we figured that maybe in 8 to 10 years, we would actually grow into that space. And we certainly didn't want to have to go through the expenditure and the headache of having to do another huge build out. Little did we know that COVID would happen, and having our space, Russ and Daughters Brooklyn, turned out to be what saved Russ and Daughters, because we could absorb the growth in shipping. We could provide a large, expansive workspace where employees felt comfortable coming to work every day throughout the pandemic. And we were able to keep going despite having 2 restaurants shut down. The last thing is to think about who you want to spend your days with at work, just the same way you might think about it, in your personal relationships. Don't get into bed with someone if you're not interested in a long-term relationship, at least, in work. It's easy to be wooed by, interesting offers and investors and people who might appeal to the sort of the glamour of our industry, but who aren't going to be with you in the trenches when times get tough. And I don't mean just during a pandemic, but just the daily reality of the work that we do. So really connect with and link up with the people who are going to go through the challenge with you. I hope this is helpful, and I hope that when we are able to travel again and you find yourself in New York, come and visit me at Russ and Daughters, and we will share some food, and I hope to show you some of the things that I've been talking about here. Be well and take care.